Hey everybody, welcome to the Growing with Fishes podcast. I'm Steve.
I'm Marty. You got me again, Steve.
and
Good bong it. You start it up every time.
Happy 420 to everybody. This will be a pretty awesome episode. We have oh shoot, we're looping here. Okay, now we're all fixed. Last audio issue. Sorry, trying to do a podcast from with new laptop equipment. It's always a little bit challenging, even though we haven't gotten everything figured out. So happy 420 to everybody. It's exciting. I had a
Got my 420 buds there.
yeah, I got my nice 420 bag of weed
That's right.
and my ball of charas.
Look at
This big ball of charas. Yeah. Sorry.
that.
You gotta talk here. You were in focus.
Oh yeah, I forget. It switches back and forth. There you go. Little platinum delight.
Nice.
It won't focus. Oh well. Let's try this.
It looks pretty purple. How cold were you getting that at night?
Well, that was from the outdoor run last year, so
okay.
Not overly cool, but later it probably got, I don't know, maybe down to like 45 or so.
Mm-hmm.
Later in the season. It went pretty late too. I think I cut it down like I don't know, I'd have to look. That's actually one of the things that I like about doing videos though, is that I can go back and see when I did stuff instead of have to remember. But if I remember right, it was right towards the end of October, so it went pretty late.
Very cool. So what do you got going on? I saw you were doing some new building.
But yeah, I set up my front porch system again. I take it down in the wintertime because the sun goes on the other side of the house, so there's not really much light out there, and it's not covered. So actually, I used to have a hot tub that would sit there, and we kind of quit using it. Weren't really doing anything with it, so moved it out of the way and set up a system there last year. It's kind of nice just to have a system on the front porch, and I just grow fruits and vegetables in it. We had strawberries and blueberries and raspberries and all kinds of different stuff. There's video of it on my YouTube from last year. And then this year, instead of doing the 2 half barrels, I redid it with a full bed across there. And I like it a lot. I had a little workbench in between, which was kind of nice before, in between the 2 barrels. But I do especially like the look of it. It's a nice clean look in the what is it, the Ultra Skim, I think FGC, is that what it's called? Something like that. Whatever that liner is called, I forget.
Ultra Scrim.
Yeah. It's got some other, I think it's FGC after it too. Ultra Skim FGC. I don't know.
They have like a new one now. It's supposed to be thinner, I think, right? Is that what it is? Yeah.
It is pretty thin, and it's still really durable. I didn't have any issues with, like, I even dropped a 2x4 on it once, and didn't really make a difference at all. Doesn't really seem stretchy. It's still pretty pliable, but it can be a little bit difficult to fold the corners in just to get them in the right spot. It's not like your just rubber liner that you would buy at Lowe's or something like that. That's, that's just going to form fit to whatever. So getting the corners folded over is really about the only thing that can be kind of a pain about it. But other than that, it worked really well. So I'm pretty excited for that. Put the raspberry back in it. I just for the wintertime, I just pull those out and put them in pots after they go into hibernation. Whatever you call it, I'm sure it's something else in the plant world. But once it goes dormant for the winter, I just set them in pots until they start getting little sprouts, and then I throw them back in the system somewhere. So I don't even keep them in there throughout the wintertime.
Very cool.
What about you? What do you got going
on? I've just been working on doing a bunch of planning, doing 3D renderings of our first farm, trying to lay out, how much plumbing we need, how much bamboo we need, how much this, that, and the other we need, working out materials, and working on another company that might possibly be working with us on import up to Canada, and just working on some stuff like that. We're kind of in a holding pattern until we get the rest of our hear back on the rest of our licensing. So it's just, you know, can work on the one property that we're allowed to work on at the moment as far as what's licensed, and the rest at the moment we're kind of waiting again because of the change in government. So until we hear when the new submission date is, it's kind of a headache. So
Yeah, can you start? I mean, I assume you can start building out systems, right? You just
oh
probably
yeah,
can't.
I can build everything. We just can't plant them out much. We can
Right.
plant we can plant a little bit. Like we have some others going right now and stuff that are just started. Um, and we've been trying to, acquire certain genetics. It's half the reason why I've been running around like a maniac on this whole island. Um, and setting up a little mother system, which is within the Jamaican legal plant count here, which memory serves me right, it's like 6 or 8. I don't know. We have it written down somewhere. Whatever. We do treat it the same as Colorado. We just make a copy of whatever the rules are. We post them in a little folded envelope in each room so that if there's any ever question with anybody, the rules right there, exactly what the law is. If you have a legal grow in the U.S., that's really good to do is keep a copy of the law in there, and then keep a copy of your licensing. And then if anyone ever wants to question you, both of them are right there. There's no challenge. There's no anything. If for some reason there's an issue, you got both copies. You got everything you need there. And that's just standard practice. If you're doing any kind of larger grow legally, it's really got to do that. So, but yeah. So we're just kind of building and waiting on my shipment of bamboo, which is going to be fun. We're going to be building a bunch of uh, basically there's going to be like a fence of bamboo growing, you know, medicinal herbs and cooking herbs to help as like an insect barrier, between the different um, outdoor grows. So that'll be kind of neat too. We'll be going culantro and cilantro and rosemary and a bunch of different types of basil. There's a bunch of different types of cooking herbs that they don't really have much here, but you can get the seeds for them, but nobody seems to know much about them as far as the culinary stuff. So we're going to be doing a bunch of that. Plus, the hotels and stuff, we can at least sell some of that to that and then help, supplement. We have a little soup kitchen we're trying to get off the ground too, so we can use the herb supplements sales from that to supplement the soup kitchen and stuff. We're working on some different projects. It's going to be pretty neat when it's all done.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. You mentioned you were looking for some genetics there in the island. Did you get I guess two questions. Did you bring any genetics with you? Were you able to do that? Or what genetics are you looking for on the island?
No, well, I know that there's some people have managed to get some high CBD and some other genetic stuff on the island, which you can acquire here, you know, from them. But no, I mean, I didn't bring anything down. It's pretty hard at the moment to legally bring cannabis seeds from the U.S. to Jamaica. So I don't even know if it's even legally possible at the moment, to be honest with you. So,
I
we
figured it
just kind
wasn't,
of
but I thought maybe
no, but there's a
it,
couple different places you can go on the island. Like we went up to Orange Hill, which is not the safest place on the island, and managed to go talk to some real, hang out with some real growers and go to the market up there and get a hold of some harder to find genetics on the island and see some plants that they came from. You know what I mean? At the same time, so I know they weren't BSing us um, and all that. So that was pretty neat. Um, that was definitely like a once in a lifetime experience that the next time we go up there, I'm going to hopefully be able to get some more video footage of. It just, I was told explicitly the first time not to bring a camera because of where we were going. So, but yeah,
right.
it'll be pretty dope. But yeah, actually one of my business partners down here is actually from that area and has a lot of family there. So, I can go up there pretty readily. It's just, you got to be a little more likely to get picked on if you're a tourist or not from Jamaica and that part of the island, which most of the island's pretty safe unless you really go looking in some areas, but that happens to be one of them that's not the friendliest to tourists.
Yeah, that was one of the places they
But
talked about a lot in that Strain Hunters video too.
yeah, they never mention that part though, that it's not
They don't
really a
mention
tourist place.
the sketchy neighborhood or any of that, but
No,
they
and
talk about Orange Hill a lot in that. I haven't
oh
watched
yeah,
it in a while, but I remember them talking about it as being like, you know, the primary place to go for the good stuff.
Yeah, it tends to be where originally it was where you could get the good landrace Jamaican, the like nice pink stuff.
Hmm.
Now it's just that's where all the real good growers are on that part of the island. Pretty much is where the best growers are for them. Not, there's some other great growers on the island, but if you're looking for the best genetics and stuff, that's where you're going to go to meet,
Right.
the guys that are bringing them in from Europe or wherever.
Now,
Once
if I
they're
remember
here,
right, in that video, they were doing a lot of their crosses were just basically plants that they put outdoor, right? I mean, that's not really
yeah. So it's really
breeding
crazy.
facility type stuff.
Yeah, I mean they'll have like 1,500 phenomes in a field.
Yeah,
There's no consistency as far as individual plant structure, which is a little bit of a shame. But at the same time, there's all the different every plant you look at is completely different, which is really cool.
yeah,
But that's if you're trying to get to a commercial crop, you're going to have to set aside a small area for your mothers that you can lock up, keep it in a little locked up greenhouse with your grow lights and stuff, and then have your outdoor crop, outside of that. And then this way, if you have a hurricane or something, you can throw boards up around your mothers and everything, and at least save your genetics. You know what I mean? So that's part of what we're building right now is a bunch of little solar setups to keep the mothers going because the shortest the days ever get is about 10 and a half, 11 hours a day. So we don't really need a beefy system to keep some mothers alive or even clones going. We only need to keep it on an extra 6 hours. I don't need a system that's totally ridiculous to do a 6 hour light cycle. You know what I mean? And the wind here we have, especially at our location here in on close to Montego Bay, is really good. I mean, we have constant 5 to 10 mile an hour winds pretty much always. So we're wind generators are going to be a large part of this particular farm. We have another one that's a little less wind, but a really good sun exposure. So we're going to be doing more solar there. Um, but yeah, I mean, we have another farm we picked up too. So if we get all of our licensing, we're now up to about 1,800 acres.
yeah. What's your projected time to get, like, I know you got to wait for your licensing, but let's say that you had your licensing, tomorrow. How long do you think it's going to take you guys to build out 1,800 acres?
I mean, to build out the whole thing, we're probably looking at least 2 or 3 years. It's just that'd be a huge project. But we'd have two huge farms online by the end of the year. We kind of prioritized which farms are more feasible, and then right now, basically, what I'm building right now is a training facility for everyone I need to work on the bigger farms. That's why we're setting it up as like as a B&B here. But in the beginning, it's just going to be basically my like managers and my workers that are going to come stay up here where it's a little bit nicer, have a nice time, learn the ins and outs of aquaponic growing on a smaller scale, on a where they can where it's not as cumbersome to move around and all that. And then once they get that, once we can give them kind of a crash course and all that, I'll handle all the nutrient stuff. We have one of the universities down here is going to be partnering up with us to do all the tissue sampling, all the nutrient sampling, all the water sampling and all that. They're doing all that with us, and we're going to be doing this whole project on aquaponic. I'm actually working with the only other guy that's doing any kind of large level aquaponic cannabis stuff, and we're both working together to do an anonymous database of aquaponic growers and their nutrient profiles of the water and tissue samples and stuff. And um, we're asking anyone that works with us to, it's a little additional part of our thing, but we're asking them if they work with us that they anonymously submit their data just for that we can continue to perfect further the aquaponic cannabis production stuff. And just maybe somebody's onto something that they aren't. That's totally cool. No one wants to take away your edge and all that. It'll be a business XYZ, and maybe you have a 1 or 2 year delay on data release so that you have a good market edge. But overall, your data will get inputted into the nutrient averages and everything else, and really help dial this in, because in the future of all of our plant production really is aquaponics, because you can produce, with the plant scraps, you can feed 75 to 80% of the insects you need to, or worms, whichever one you're using, or we use a rotation to keep your
Right.
fish alive. And then you're able to fit, you make a much more self-sustaining system. And not only that, look at the cost savings. I know at home right now on my cannabis grow, I'm spending about 35 to 40% of what I was running hydro nutrients, and that just strictly a nutrient difference between the fish food and supplemental stuff. Not to mention, I can grow all my vegetables and stuff off the side lights. I have horizontal towers hanging off the side now, and my roommate's growing all of his kitchen herbs hanging off in between my last grow bed and my fish tank. You know what I mean? You're not going to do that with a hydro system, and have that kind of freedom, or you can grow everything from lettuce to peppers and everything in between without the lettuce tasting like, something weird or something. You know what I mean? So it just gives you much more flexibility. Not to mention, the whole idea that you're using a much heavier microbial load and a lower nutrient load is going to give you better flavor in the long run. You're going to get better, less chance of getting that weird chemical flavor, the weird chemical taste of your nutrients.
Right. I grow obviously a lot of fruits and vegetables in my systems just because I like to be able to draw that nitrogen out of the system and use it for something that I can actually eat. Anyway, it's just a more, for just a home system, it makes tons of sense. I mean, there's no, like you're saying, like, I mean, even when like right now when my canopy is pretty well filled out, you still get plenty of light that comes through to be able to grow, like microgreens is a great one to be able to grow underneath. I know we talk about those a lot. You get the added benefit of popping all those seeds in your bed is just going to give you more natural enzymes, similar to like a sprouted seed tea.
Hold on a second. I got a door. It's about to break if I don't do something about it.
All right, go ahead.
I apologize.
So, like I was saying, you get the opportunity to be able to take advantage of both your excess nitrogen and your excess lighting and create food out of it. And so I think that's definitely, a great thing to note is that, you don't have to separate your plants. And obviously hydro growers, they do separate a lot of that stuff. Again, most of the time in hydro, you want to keep most of your microbial life absent from the system. You don't want other plants in there. There are some exceptions, like especially now that you have more, no-till growers that are setting up no-till pots, or you have SIPs, which are, I don't know if you look much into SIP systems, but I mean, they're basically, not that much different than a dual root zone system. You're still muted, by the way. Still muted.
It's like a bottom feeding system, right?
Yeah, basically there's a water reservoir that sits at the bottom that simulates a water table, and then there's soil up above it, and the soil doesn't go all the way down to the water, just like in a dual root zone system. So it's really not that much different, other than they just have a little breather tube that goes up the side that you pour more water and nutrients in. But it does focus on most of the time on microbial life also. So most of the time you're just feeding raw nutrients and then top feeding every once in a while. You should check them out. It's the PFA group is doing a big thing on them right now. There's lots of information out.
Is that something like the Octopod or something?
You're breaking up. I couldn't hear you.
Is that something like the Octopod?
I haven't seen that. I don't know.
Okay.
What is it?
So the Octopod is kind of like a fabric or smart pot that's on top of a little reservoir that has a little float, and you can top it off. It's just it's kind of like a dual root, similar to a dual root zone.
Yeah.
Very, very similar, only they're running it with hydro nutrients. So
yeah, I think that's the same principle. They call it, they talk about what's that term they use all the time? I can't remember now. I can't remember it now, but basically it's imitating the natural life cycle. So that basically the idea is that you have that layer of soil and you have the water table that would be underneath the layer of soil that the plants can reach down and get water from there anytime they want to be able to, but still have the root system up above get exposed to oxygen. And you can obviously still, water nutrients into the top, and I'm sure they recommend you do that. I don't know a ton about it, but I do know that it's pretty much, to me, seems like dual root zone setup with hydro nutrients. So it sounds like it's the same thing as what you're describing.
Yeah, so actually, let's see if I can pull up the picture that I used. I have a really awesome picture that I got shared. there's 3 different types of root structures, and there's a particular type of root that goes down deep and wants to be more in the water, and then your shallower roots are much hairier and fuzzier and will do a much better job of picking up nutrients, especially micros and macros. Your deeper roots pick up iron, particularly in water. They do pick up some other things, but that's kind of their primary purpose. Yeah, so you have your tap roots, which are your kind of your main bigger root. Then you have your fibrous roots, and then you have your adventitious roots, which are can form another any other part of the plant. So if you have like spider plants that have the roots that are coming off, that are just off in the air, those are adventitious. You have your fibrous roots, which are the real hairy ones that you see shallower in your root zone, which is like in a dual root zone. That's where you're predominantly where your soil layer is, all your fibrous roots. And then your tap roots are the ones that go down into the water and then spread out there. And the ends of them are fibrous roots. But again, they're primarily your tap roots that are water and iron seeking. And potassium is another one that they like to pick up in the deeper part.
Yeah, that sounds cool. You should look up the SIPs when you have some time just to check it out. And yeah, I think it's like I said, it's pretty much the same thing, except for you. In this case, you don't have a, or I guess dual root zone in aquaponics is basically the same thing, except for you have a water exchange that happens as opposed to just topping the water off from time to time.
Yeah, and the biggest thing you'll see with the dual root zone aquaponic systems, especially when it comes to cannabis, is, you know, with a dual root zone, you can actually run a fully continuously recirculating system with, you know, every other method, hydro, or even some aquaponic people do the decoupled. That's not a fully recirculating system. They're using it as a base for the nutrient solution, but it's, you know, that's basically just using it as a base for a hydroponic solution, as far as I'm concerned, because they're dumping and replacing it semi-regularly and restarting over, you know. And that's one of the biggest things that you have to remember when you're dosing, especially for aquaponics, is that, you know, you only ever want to dose for about 25% of what your target nutrient level is, because even 30%, you know, you don't want to dose, like typically for hydro, you know, most of your dosage recommendations are to go from 0 to 50% of your nutrient recommendation. And they'll say, well, you can go up to double the dosage or whatever. Well, yeah, double the dosage is actually 9 times out of 10 what they, in an ideal world, think a perfect plant would uptake. But you have to vary from strain and everything else, and that's something that you really want to consider, you know. That's why you'll see a lot of them will say to start off with a half dose, but you can double dose or whatever. That's a really common method with hydroponic dosing. Whereas with a lot of your aquaponic nutrients, you know, you do need to be careful, because if you're using a hydroponic, and we touch on this when we get to the is it safe for aquaponics section, you know, be careful. Don't follow the directions, the dosing directions for a hydroponic system. If you're using it, that's great. If you find a product that's aquaponic safe, that's great. But you need to be adjusting your dosages to maybe using about a quarter of what they're telling you to for an aquaponic system, is basically what I'm trying to get at, in order to be on the safe side. So say, for example, a CalMag product is, well, CalMag's a bad one.
Let's not go CalMag.
Yeah.
Never go full CalMag.
Yeah. But Epsom salt, that's a good one.
Right.
Epsom salt. You could always start off with that, and you know, start off with 25% of what it tells you to dose on a hydroponic, you know, dosage, because you have to remember that you have to maintain much lower nutrient levels in an aquaponic system. Because if you start getting real high on your numbers, you're going to get everything all out of whack. And the reason why aquaponics works just as efficiently as hydroponics is you're running lower nutrient levels, but you're able to stabilize them and keep them there a lot better than you otherwise would be in a hydroponic system, because you're able to achieve that ionic balance because you're running everything at lower levels. Stuff isn't fighting each other as much. You're not getting a huge ion exchange between everything, and you're not getting a huge imbalance in your salt levels and everything else. So you don't get all these, you know, huge imbalances. The one benefit of running aquaponics is that you're basically running everything in like a low dose worm tea, You know, basically what the fish are making is a fish tea. You know,
Right.
it's very similar. And then you add something like worm tea, and you add some supplemental minerals to it, and you get a really, really good nutrient. Now you might have to dose 2 or 3 times a week more than you would in a traditional system, but you're getting the added benefit of running much lower levels, but maintaining them rock solid, which is exactly all the plant needs. And you're getting much better flavor. Like, I'm sure you'll attest, the flavor for aquaponic cannabis, especially if you do the nutrients right, compared to anything else, is just a joke. It's so much better. It's so much better. It only compares to some of the best soil grown that I've ever had, maybe. You know, in terms of flavor and richness and earthiness and everything else.
The same stuff that I showed you earlier from the outdoor last year is definitely by far the best tasting weed that I've ever smoked, and smoking it right now. And you know, it's been cured for quite a while now in glass jars, and I've just you know, done a really good job with it. And so I think that's definitely you know, definitely accurate. I think that, you know, we've talked about this before in terms of that. And most of the strains that I grow do turn out really well. But for this right here, the only stuff that I added was, you know, essentially worm tea or worm juice, whatever you want to call it. When I was doing this, I started out doing the aerated tea, which was adding, you know, basically just adding water to it and aerating it. And then, you know, I guess I sort of came to the conclusion that you know, it's already going to get aerated in the system to a certain extent, and I didn't really see a huge benefit in terms of doing that. So I really only did that probably about 4 or 5 times, and I was adding about I would say about a half gallon of worm tea to the system about every 2 or 3 days. And that's the only thing that I added to that at all. I didn't add anything else. And that's all just fruit broken down in the worm tea. And in terms of that, it may, like, obviously the outdoor takes a little bit longer. I would say that overall flowering time, you know, they didn't finish up till the end of October. But one of the things that you mentioned was how little it cost. I think essentially all you're looking at for the cost there for nutrient wise is, you know, obviously my fruit scraps don't cost me anything. I already had worms from my previous grows, so, but even still, I guess if you wanted to count that, I think a pound of worm castings is like maybe $15 at the farmer's market, like at most. And then the power to run the pump, which is maybe like $4 or $5. And then I grew, you know, like 2 pounds of this. So in terms of like quality versus cost or efficiency, however you want to measure efficiency, whether it's power efficiency, whether it's nutrient efficiency, or any of those, I think that it's clearly more sustainable than I guess other growing solutions that I've ran into. And I think it's considerably less work, like, than doing hydro or anything else. Like, once everything is set up and maintained, you know, feeding the fish and dropping in some worm tea, you know, really doesn't take up that much time.
Oh yeah, your like labor per day, you know, is definitely lower than a lot of other methods for sure. You know, I spend a little bit of time in my grow every day, but you know, it's I'm not having to spend, you know, an hour changing out my reservoir and then dialing in my nutrients again, then testing them and waiting 10 minutes. And I don't have to deal with any of that crap anymore. You know, I don't have to worry. Like, yeah, I have to top water them twice a week, but so what? That's no big deal. It's no different than watering anything else. You know, so, but I do things a little bit different than you do, but it's still not a huge difference as far as that goes.
Right, and it's just you know, I get that pushback a lot. You know, that you know, that it's a lot of work in order to be able to get good product out of it, and I just don't understand the argument because of how much work it takes in hydro to get good quality out of it too. I mean, you can't just put the plant in some water and let it grow and expect to be able to get any kind of results out of it. You know, like, you go buy a bunch of bottles and you come back and you mix different stuff together and you make your little concoction, and then you change out your reservoir every few weeks. And, you know, like, there's a lot of different things that, you know, some people take them all the way down and even clean out the inside. I of the reservoirs on a regular basis. And I haven't done that in I think 3 years now. You know what I mean? Like,
It's because you're not running a sterile system.
right. And we've talked about that in hydro before too. And so, I just don't see it as that much different. And then obviously if you throw in an automatic fish feeder, like you don't even really have to be there to get sort of like a good baseline of food across. But I guess
I totally disagree with automatic fish feeders unless you're on vacation or away from the weekend. I think like you should not rely on an automatic fish feeder as your regular source of feed. And I'll explain why. I know it sounds kind of dumb, and it's like, well, why would you not want to automate something that you can like forget about?
I don't do it either, but mostly just because like that's like the part I enjoy. Like I like going out there and tossing the fish out or tossing the food out to the fish and doing that.
So this is the thing though. So you can look at the responsiveness of your fish and get a gauge on like, if you have really high nitrates or really high ammonia for this, that, or the other reason, because flow stopped or this, whatever, your fish are going to all stay to the bottom. They're going to behave differently. You don't even have to go test your water. Yeah, you're going to test your water, but it's going to be a good early indicator that something's not going on right. Or, this is my other argument, or a huge argument that I make, and I've made this argument many times. This is your main input to your whole system. All of your nutrients, or not all of your nutrients, the bulk of your nutrients all come from this input. Would you automate a hydroponic system and let it go willy-nilly, completely unwatched? Yeah, some people do auto dosers and stuff like that, but nobody lets them run long-term. No one's running them 365 days a year without tinkering with them. You know what I mean? All you do with an auto feeder is refill it. The thing is that if that thing clogs or doesn't work for a day, that's your whole input to the whole system. Your nutrients could fall off, and your fish are fine. They can start for 2 to 4 weeks without much of an issue, but you're going to notice a huge slowdown on your plant growth because your nitrogen is going to just drop off the cliff. So, something that takes 15 to 30 seconds a day to me and is that crucial just seems ridiculously silly to me that you would not take the 15 to 30 seconds a day and put your hand out and see what's going on. So even if I ran a huge, later on when we have all these different farms going on, we'll use that as an example. I want someone I know or me hand feeding all the different tanks each day, morning and evening or whatever the schedule ends up being. I don't want any of that automated. I want that done by hand. And for the reasons that I just explained, the fish's reaction is going to be an early indicator of a chemistry issue, and the fact that that's my main input. I need to, if I show them they need this many ounces of stuff that goes in, that's how much I want in. The automated one is not going to do that kind of, accurate, dosing or anything. Yeah, it'll turn the corkscrew this many rotations, but depending on how it falls in there, that could be a big range. If it's a clumpier piece, or it gets moldy, it sticks together, they fail, the timers stop working, the batteries stop working, the power stops working, this, that, or the other. They fail. It's a failure point that can be easily solved by a human being, and it's crucial to your whole system. Would you completely automate all of your nutrient dosing without any kind of like feedback? I mean, it just seems crazy, The other thing is say you're testing your nitrates and your nitrates are going up and up and up. How are you going to go in and tell your auto timer not to feed it that, more often? You can turn them down or whatever, but at the same time, it's nothing like saying, hey, cut the dosage back by half for a week and let it balance back out or this, that, or the other. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so much better to have that kind of. It's one of the few components I feel like is important enough to not leave automated. Yeah, if you're getting on a ludicrous scale, maybe you can dial it in, but you're also going to have the testing equipment that's giving you the live feedback at that point. You see what I'm saying? Once you get to that scale, there's a cost analysis where you're going to have a high enough investment to afford the kind of feedback you need from the system.
I think that there's a lot of value in just having to go out and spend that much time in the garden. It's really not that much time, first of all. Like, you can go out and just grab some fish food and throw it out, watch the reaction. Then at least you have that sort of feedback about the system like you're talking about. Even if you're doing your testing, it's not like you can go back and ask the fish feeder how the fish reacted the last time that you fed them. Whereas if it's an actual person doing it, then you can go back to that person and you can say, hey, Bill, you know, when you've been feeding the fish the last couple of days, have you noticed anything different? And then you'll be able to get feedback from that. So it definitely makes sense. And I've I've considered doing it, going on vacation, but I've always just had people stop by and feed my pets, as it were. They just happen to be fish also.
If you're just going away for temporary or whatever, and it's not, that's totally fine. Like
Right.
100% pro auto timers, auto feeders, and all that. But you should not. That should not be your normal, reliable input to the system. Is my point.
Right, right, which makes sense. That's for sure. So, do you want to do your new segment you were talking about, the stuff you can use in aquaponics?
Oh yeah. You had some stuff you picked up at the store, and we
Yeah.
have a new
So,
segment called, can I use this in aquaponics? If you guys have any questions, I know we'll do the two that you did, and then we have some questions that people wrote in.
so I just I just went to my local grow shop here in town. I like to buy stuff from local grow shops, just because it's not really that much more money. Like my hydrogen maybe cost me an extra $20 over the course of 2 or 3 bags. And they keep the stuff in stock. I can drive in and pick it up, and I like to keep stuff local when I can. It doesn't cost me that much more, and money turns over so much well when you spend it locally, and especially for guys that are trying to keep stuff around for like-minded people, I suppose. So I do. When I was in there to get the hydrogen, I decided I would look around and say, okay, well, what stuff can I find in here that I would put into my aquaponic system if I was going to dose it with something. So I picked up a couple of things. These are like I said, the raw microbes. You guys can see that. I think 12 or 13 bucks. Yeah, 13 bucks there. And it's got a whole list here on the back of the different beneficial bacteria you can add, and it's just in powder form. And what I did is I just added some of this to the worm juice that comes out of my worm bin that I normally dose into the system anyway. So I just added some into that right before. And then the other thing that I picked up was this maxi crop. And you can see here on the back, it also gives you a handy little deal. It's 0017. So obviously that's a pretty good indicator of what's in it. But for the most part, these are, this is stuff that I've seen people use on a regular basis, both for no-till gardens and so basically you're just feeding kelp to your microbes. So those are definitely two things that you can use in your system if you see those in your local grow shop. I didn't really see much else that I was terribly interested in putting into my system. This company, Raw, did have like some different iron supplements and different things like that that appeared to be fine, but those were just the two that I picked up to be able to check that out.
I've used some of the Raw products. They actually, back when I used to work for Aquaponic Source, they sent us, when I very first started there, they sent us a whole batch of stuff to test out. And we tested all of that, and we didn't find any of it to be non-fish safe, anything that we ever tested from them. And then the Maxi Crop has been long sold both in Australia and the US for aquaponic systems, and that's a great product. One thing I was going to touch on earlier was, so if you're using microbes or the seaweed, and you're using it for compost tea brewing, the reason why you want to brew it for 24 to 48 hours is not so much to alter the nutrients in the water particularly, but what you're doing is you're giving a confined, safe space to brew out your good microbes that are in there, and they're not having to compete with those other microbes that you have in the system. As far as, there might be 3 to 5 different microbes that all feed on the XYZ same food source that your particular beneficial microbe might also feed on. But if you dump a huge population into there that you've been breeding out in a bucket for 24 to 48 hours, sometimes even longer, some brews are even up to 72 hours, you're basically giving a safe cultured place for those particular microbes you're trying to get going to have, very little competition aside from the food source and their initial seed spawn that you're putting in there. And that's the biggest reason to brew them longer. But if you have a really good established bacteria colony, that becomes less and less important.
Right. And so, that's pretty much the way I look at it is I don't, and having done it both ways, I can't say that I noticed a big difference either way in terms of production. And I think that the key is if you have a healthy system that you're adding it into, that beneficial bacteria that you're adding in, your system should be that safe place for it to do it. You shouldn't have a ton of competition for it in your system anyway. Now, that being said, I also added some mix right to the worm bin itself, so that it'll definitely have that in there also. And then the other thing that I don't have up here that I should have brought up here is the EM1 inoculant that I have that I also add in that I add into the worm bin itself. And then I have a little bucket that I keep in my kitchen that I basically treat it like a fruit fermentation bucket. So that's where all my initial banana peels and stuff go. And I mix it EM1 and water in that bucket, and it has a lid on it with a little breather hole. And then when it fills up, that's when I take it out to the worm bin outside. So that can be a nice way to sort of do like a pre-breakdown of your fruit before you put it into the compost. And it also gives you a place to be able to easily just put that stuff in the kitchen so that you're not tempted to just throw it away.
Yeah.
So that's basically the process that I have. Like anytime we have like bananas that go bad before they get eaten, which doesn't happen very often because we usually eat them up pretty quick, but any banana peels, basically any fruit scraps at all go into that bucket with the EM1 and water, and then a little bit of labs too. It's also great to add in there. When I had a batch still mixed up, I would put a little bit into there also to start out. So yeah, so from there it goes into the worm bin. Then just when you water the worms, you get the water that leaches out the bottom, and that's what I use. I just add it right back into the system, and yeah, works great for me.
That sounds great.
Pretty low maintenance. I like low maintenance.
Yeah, low maintenance always is great. So we had, I think we had some other questions too. Let me pull them up here. We had some questions from a guy named Kurt. I won't tell you his last name. He says, what are your thoughts on no-till dual root zone? I guess that would be more your section than maybe we'd both have to answer that one together. And then he also, another question is, do you supplement any nitrogen in your soil layer? And yes, I do. I always make sure I add some worm casings, or I also make my own I call it fish casings, where I take the solids that are separated in my solid separator and take those and basically use them as worm casings. And they also have a reasonably high nitrogen content. You don't want to burn them too much, and you got to remember that that nitrogen that you need in that layer is only really needed for about the first 2 to 3 weeks until that plant hits the water. Basically, the first week or two, once it hits the water and goes down into the fish water, it's not pulling any more nitrogen. Or it really has no need to pull nitrogen out of that soil layer anymore. So it's really all you need to supplement for that particular growth period. But as far as the no-till dual root zone, I do know, I think I've talked to one person so far that's been trying something like that. I don't see why that wouldn't work. I would recommend using larger pots if you were doing that, which would mean your spacing would be a little bit bigger, which might be an issue for people with smaller grows. But that would probably be my only adjustment, is that maybe use something that's a lot larger, because remember, your soil zone is a lot smaller. So if you're trying to maintain a real healthy soil zone, you're going to want to try and make it a little bit larger than you traditionally would, because you're going to have to compete in the beginning with the old roots and stuff.
Right, and I think that SIPs is probably, we talked about that just a little bit ago, and that's probably about the same thing is what you're talking about, is a no-till section for your dual root zone. And the box that they put them in is probably larger than what the pot that you would use for a dual root zone. So I don't think it's really that much different than your concept of dual root zone, because the idea of no-till is keeping the soil alive and full of microbes as opposed to just being an inert media that you can grow stuff in with a hydroponic solution. Basically, a lot of indoor growers that use soil, they essentially just use it as a dead medium as opposed to a living one. So, Steve, are you still there? I think we lost Steve. Are you back?
Yep, we had one of our Jamaican hiccups.
So yeah, I think that the SIPs, like I was saying, is basically what he's talking about, and you should definitely take a look at that because again, it's the concept of keeping your soil alive as opposed to just inert media that you're using a hydro solution to water in. It's really not that much different than like growing in cocoa or something like that, coconut coir. So I think that you should definitely look into SIPs. And the concepts are really the same. Keep it full of microbial life, so that the soil itself stays alive as opposed to dead. And so I don't think that it's that much different anyway. I think the dual root zone is essentially the same. What would you call it? Principles as no-till. Yeah. So, and check out SIPs. That would be my other advice to that guy. Is if you look up the Probiotic Farmers Alliance, I think is what it's called, group on Facebook, and they're doing a whole study right now. They just sent out a whole bunch of different boxes to people where they're doing test grow outs of different things in SIPs. So it's a cool group. There's definitely some egos that float around in there. So my advice to you is if you're a newbie in that group is just be a fly on the wall, and pretty much assume that, questions will be asked and answered. And if you have something that you really want to know, obviously go ahead and ask it. But for the most part, people are pretty helpful in there with the exception of with a few egos. But they're definitely doing a lot more of that kind of stuff. There's people that have built out entire beds, so like a 4x8 soil bed with a SIPs water space underneath it. So a lot of good information on there. So check out SIPs. I think that's right along the same idea that you're talking about of combining no-till and dual root zone.
Yeah, just trying to diversify your microbes as much as possible.
Right. Really the same kind of thing when you're talking to the other guys who are reading this stuff. In the PFA group, it's all about, the same stuff that we talk about in aquaponics, which is all the benefit of having the microbes be what make your nutrients available a little bit over time as opposed to all at once or in bursts.
So you had two other questions. The other two were, I water on a timer. What is your latest recommendation for frequency and I don't know. Sorry about that. I didn't realize.
Hey, there you are.
I didn't realize I cut out. So he had another question was, I water on a timer. What is your latest recommendation for frequency on the pumping water into the beds? I normally like pumping 15 minutes on, half an hour off. I know a lot of people also like 15 minutes on and 45 minutes off, but I've only seen a benefit in doing increasing frequency. As long as they get that flood and drain and that water pulls down, it drafts fresh air into the root zone. So it really isn't a problem. I personally prefer bell siphons. I find they do a little bit better long term. But you don't really, that's my personal favorite. But as far as timer settings, I like 15 minutes on, half an hour off.
I don't know if we just lost Steve altogether. Hello?
Hello? I don't know what happened there. That was really bizarre. My connection didn't die. It did for a second, but I'm not
It's
sure
like
why that was all weird. Make sure we're still live on the interwebs here.
it still says live, but it even says that when you're disconnected, so I'm not sure.
Okay,
So I
we'll
messed
see.
around with a couple of different water timings, and I've done both of those. I've done 15
there we
minutes.
go. Okay, sorry about that, everybody.
Did you get it all straightened out?
So we got yeah, we're all good. There's actually a question. Oh, go ahead. Did you have anything else to say about the timer settings? Did
I
you hear
messed
any of that?
Yeah, a couple of them. I've messed around with 15 minutes on, 45 minutes off, like you were talking about. And I honestly didn't. And I also ran 30 minutes on, half an hour off. And finally, I think I ended up running, I think it was an hour on and 2 hours off, I think was what I finally ended up running towards the end of flowers. So I actually found that running it less often in veg was better and more often in flower. And most of the time, I'm pretty sure that's just because of the size of the plant, but could all just be in my head too. But I honestly, no matter what timing I set it to, as long as I had enough time with it turned off, providing oxygen to the roots, I don't think you really have much of an issue. So my rule of thumb is that you always try to have it dry for as much time as you ran it. So if it's wet for 30 minutes, then try to make sure it's dry for 30 minutes at least. And then that's my only advice. And I give the same advice to soil growers too when they are trying to figure out how much they want to water. That was always kind of the rule of thumb when we were just doing indoor watering. You know, I guess like I was saying, hydro with dead soil basically. You know, that was the same rule of thumb too, is that however long it took your pots to dry, so if I water them and it takes them 6 hours for them to dry all the way back out, then that means they need to be dry for at least another 6 hours. So, and you'll find plants and veg, they don't drink nearly as much. They take longer for the soil to dry out. And so that's always been kind of my rule of thumb. And honestly, I didn't notice a huge difference between any of the different ones that I tried. So I would probably recommend the 15 minutes on and 45 minutes off, and just go with that unless you have an issue with it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, normally I'd recommend bell siphons. They just work better. But that's the biggest thing I would say on that. We had a question from chat.
As long as that, you know, float valves obviously is another popular thing that you can use to trigger your siphon. But basically, the more often that it fills up and drains and forces air out and pulls new air in, it's going to be better off for the plant itself. So the more often you run it, in theory, even on the timer, should be the best. And I don't use bell siphons personally. I don't. I've used external siphons or U siphons or loop siphons or whatever the hell you want to call them for like 3 or 4 years now. And I honestly don't really care how all the water gets out of the bed or doesn't get into the bed. As long as it works reliably, it doesn't really matter. So if you want to build a bell siphon, then build a bell siphon. If you want to build an external siphon, then do that. My whole thing is, as long as it works consistently, it's fine. And so my new favorite siphon has, mostly because I do a lot of small systems and barrel systems. And then even recently, this one that I just did on the front porch, you can look at that one, and it's basically just flex tubing that's built and bent into the shape of a U and held in place. And I have 2 beds that run like that in the garage right now, and I have that whole one on the front porch. And I've my entire outdoor system last year all ran on external siphons, and I honestly don't have an issue with them. I get to keep all my grow bed space, so they're, you know, all the drains are on the bottom, so I don't have to worry about a bellow siphon sticking up in the middle. So honestly, as much as you can fill it up and drain it out is going to be best. A lot of people run the timers that only give you like 8 times a day though, so I think that was you know, probably a determining factor in a lot of different watering cycles, and that's what that's what I have too, is just the real basic timers. I think I get 8. It's like 8 or 10 different settings that you can have per day. So anything else on siphons?
Nothing on siphons. He had there's a question in chat. Have you guys had any experience with Just Right Extra made by General Hydro? Give me a couple of minutes to look at what the active ingredients are and stuff, and we'll give you a comment on that here.
What was it called?
It's in chat. It's called Just Right Extra, made by GH Products. I would imagine it's General Hydro. And we'll look that up. We had another question in the meantime. Can you explain?
In my chat, by the way, you must have, maybe you sent it to just you.
No. It's on the chat for the YouTube. If you just look at the Just Right Extra. Just making sure there's no other questions from chat here. No, looks really good. Yeah, if you the chat in Hangouts doesn't display the people on YouTube, you got to have the YouTube page open.
Can you toss me the link to
that? Sure. Sorry for the fumbleness here.
All I see is Ponics.
Just Right Extra. But General Hydro.
There are 2 camps, DQ Smart.
GH, just you're talking about organic soil mix? Is that what your question is? Jack, it looks like Jack Herrera is asking in chat. Is that what your question was? Was about Just Right soil mix? All right, while he's talking about, while we're waiting to hear back from him, we have another question. Can you explain how to add worm tea or other supplements to your system, when and the amount? We actually touched on this a little bit in episode 1. Marty and I do them a little bit differently. Marty does worm teas directly into the system as his main supplement. I do both worm teas into the supplement as well as some other supplementation. And I also run dual root zone systems, dual root zone pots, which allow me to have a little more leeway with my supplementation, and the allows it to be more available in a slower time release and a longer period of availability directly on the root system, just because you can basically use the soil as a sponge to make your nutrients available and provide a great house for all your microbes. And that's how I handle it. I know I don't know if Marty, if you want to comment on that a little further. I know I mentioned right before this about wanting to brew your teas for normally 48 hours or more. We've mentioned before there's a really good website called Microbe Organics, and I know that Marty has a couple on labs. But do you want to touch more on that?
Yeah. So I guess for the labs part of it, you can mix those in just about any stage. You can pour them right into the beds. I add them to my, like I mentioned before, my fruit bucket that I keep in the kitchen. And so I would definitely look into making those. It's a very, I guess, aggressive beneficial bacteria, and it has a lot of different characteristics that you definitely want in your aquaponic system. And it's not going to, from what I understand, I'm sure some people might be able to correct me, but it's not going to live in your system for an extended period of time. So you definitely want to make some on a fairly regular basis, or you can like add molasses to it, put it in the fridge and store it for up to 6 months if you want to make big batches at a time. that's fine because you don't necessarily need to dose a lot of it at a time. So, but for, I guess if you want to, and I talked about this a little bit already, but my whole process, I guess, is that all my fruit starts out in the bucket inside with the EM1 inoculant and some water and some labs. They all go into the bucket on the counter. And so that's my banana peels, my apple cores, my strawberry parts that don't get eaten, grapes that, are bad in the bag, or basically anything that you would normally just throw away that's fruit material. I do make some exceptions for vegetables like broccoli or cauliflower or something that is floured out and is going to contain something besides nitrogen.
Mm-hmm.
So all that stuff goes into the bucket. When it gets full, it gets taken out to the worm bin, and I essentially just toss it in there, throw some soil on top of it, and I basically want to bury it and then put the lid back on top so it stays dark in there. And in terms of making the tea itself, I basically just put water into the back of it, and the worms need water anyway, so you're doing that every couple of days anyway. So I go through and water that. It drains all the way through down out of the hole in the bottom. The barrel in the bottom is lined with multiple layers of filter material, so that you don't really get any soil coming through at all. And it's basically just, I guess you would call it worm juice as opposed to worm tea. And then at this time, that's when I added these, which are also in the worm bin itself. So I did add some to that already. I added labs to the worm bin already. I would also add labs at that time. Once the water is leached out, I would add labs directly to that, and then just pour it right into the beds. I just did that for my new system I built on the front porch. I mixed it with half already used media that I had from other systems with all my new media on top, and then I inoculated it with labs and a mix of other stuff. So of that same tea I just talked about making, and that's my entire process. The whole time, I would say maybe, as far as just pouring the stuff in there and making the tea, it's about maybe 15 minutes or so to get the water to drain through. And it's, I would say, about a half gallon that comes out, and I just pour the whole thing into that system. And 2 to 3 times a week. And that's my whole regiment.
Awesome. So I did a little research here. So it looks like it's a general hydroponics product. What's it called? Just Right Extra. And it's a soil mix. And here's the ingredients. So it's coca coir, which is fine as long as it's a good low sodium variety. We have the next ingredient is ancient Alaskan humus or humate, forest humate. That's a pretty common ingredient. That's totally fine for aquaponics. Next thing is worm castings. That's another thing that's perfectly fine for aquaponics. The next thing is diatomaceous earth. It's another totally fine thing for aquaponics. It's also insects. It's not good for them at all. Next up is mycorrhizae root inoculant. Next up is probiotic inoculant, beneficial microbes. Next up is organic sulfate of potash, which is potassium sulfate, which is a great bloom booster. Next up is your organic bone char, which is high in phosphorus, and real good for that. Then you have your ancient seabed deposit clay, which is totally fine. I'm just going down the list here. Sorry if I sound like an idiot.
No, I'm on YouTube. Go ahead.
And but that's everything that's in there, and the pH is mixed up to a 7. So I don't see anything on here that would be a problem. It actually would be a really good soil potentially for a dual root zone system. It actually sounds really good.
Yeah, it definitely looks good. I'm looking at it too on that. I just wasn't sure if that's what I thought he was talking about, like a supplement of some kind. So that's why I was confused at first. But yeah, it looks like it would be a good mix to have for your soil layer.
Do you have another one? I got another email. Let me pull it up here. Somebody was asking me some questions.
There's a few on the Reddit.
Yeah, That was another good one.
So why don't people, or most people, grow fruiting plants? Is it possible? Also, concrete. Is that cool for a fish enclosure, or should we use something else?
Sure. So for fruiting plants, a lot of people don't grow fruiting plants because a lot of people haven't put a lot of time and research into trying to perfect fruiting crop production. It wasn't really until the last 4 to 5 years, aquaponic commercial production really tried to change its focus off of lettuce, to be honest with you. Traditionally, it's been lettuce and basil and cooking herbs and very niche market products or stuff with you can do high in bulk and sell to a local community market. They never really tried to push that, and then it wasn't really until I spent the last 3 years researching that pretty much exclusively for a company, and along with a bunch of different product and research development. But that's the biggest reason why, is that a lot of people haven't put the time and research into trying to push those yields up to get them close to hydro and still maintain fish safeness and everything. That's one of the best things about using something like a dual root zone for really large tomatoes or peppers or cannabis or anything that's going to grow pretty much indefinitely. It allows you to supplement and supplement and supplement and pretty much not have to worry about, any kind of negative impact on the fish. And because the fish are providing, 65 to 80% of your nutrients, depending on what you're growing, you're only having to supplement a small amount, and it ends up saving you a bunch of money and everything else. So, but that's the biggest reason why, is it's pretty much just hasn't really been worked on a whole bunch until recently. Next up is concrete. So, the concrete's fine as long as you seal it. Now, most concrete has a product in it called lye, which will raise your pH and takes a long time to leach out. So, if it's 6 months to a year old, then it's going to start to be okay. But otherwise, you need to seal it with a rubberized sealer or a concrete sealer that's otherwise food safe. There's a couple different types available in the market. Some are clear, some are white, and some are black. So it just depends on what you're looking for. Let's see what else we had on here. Somebody asked, what kind of extra stuff do you have to do to grow fruit plants? You basically have to pay more attention to your micronutrient levels and maintaining your calcium, magnesium, potassium, and phosphorus levels at a higher level than you normally would, but doing so without screwing everything else up.
Or killing your fish.
Or killing your fish, which can be tricky at times, but at this point I can kind of do it brainlessly, but it takes a little bit of practice.
It also depends on your goals too, because some people lose track of the fact that there are a lot of people that do aquaponics that really care a lot about the quality of fish that come out of it. I have goldfish and koi for the most part. I really don't care about their experience all that much, or how much they're growing or how fast they're growing or weight they're putting on. But a place that's trying to use that for business, for instance, if you're trying to grow catfish or tilapia or different things like that, then you have a whole different set of concerns that I don't even consider dealing with.
And that's definitely something that I focus on, is making sure that we're never exceeding the what is allowable for aquaculture. Making sure we're sticking to the aquaculture rules, so that it's no different than anything else that's commercially grown as far as fish production.
Right, and I also don't have to stock anything at high levels. I think in my first indoor grow, I think I had 5 fish, 5 relatively small goldfish. So it's not like you need a huge amount to be able to grow what we want to grow. But if you are growing for some sort of profit or even just food, a lot of times you want to go with higher stocking rates than what I do, just because you want to have more fish in there. And then that's going to make, obviously, other issues like higher nitrogen, for instance, is probably the primary concern if you want to stock more fish. So just a whole nother set of concerns if you're trying to get production out of both systems. fish wise and plant wise.
Let me see what was the next question we had on here.
See, there's one about organic certifications and what.
Oh yeah. So having worked for a company that went from being not organic certified to organic certified, I cannot think of a realistic reason why anyone, unless you're an established farm, I would not even attempt for it. Like, yes, build out, like look at it, make sure all your equipment is organic certifiable. If you plan on moving up to that, do not open up with the idea that you're going to be organic certified. First off, you need to learn how to grow everything aquaponically first on the scale that you're doing. And most people that do an aquaponics farm haven't grown on that scale before. At least a lot of newer people, or they haven't done it quite on the size that their new farm is, all, with them being in charge. It's pretty rare, if not non-existent, that happens. So the first thing I would say is get your system up and running. And if you want to have a good certification to aim at off the bat, look at something like Certified Naturally Grown. It even has Certified Naturally Grown will even do certifications, I believe, now for cannabis. If not, I know that they're planning to with that license. As well as, and then start off with that and then move up, get a couple harvests going, then move up to the organic. But trying to jump right into the organic is such a pain, and you have to cross your I's, dot your T's. It's a mountain of paperwork. It's going to cost you an extra 20-ish grand, even on the smallest scale, to even attempt to get the certification, which can be revoked at any time. And, it's just a huge extra list of burdens and complications that, you can still get to that standard and use that and list organic whatever as your inputs. And you don't necessarily have to list your stuff as organic, your product as organic, but you can legally put, organic, this was used organic, that was used organic, and do it that way and still basically have an organic product that's on the market without paying for any of that anyway.
Right. I mean, basically what it comes down to is that their little stamp is going to cost you about 20 grand. And it's really not going to change the overall stuff.
No, you'll be able to get, 15 to 30% more on your product, but is that 15 to 30% more worth the $20,000 to $40,000 depending on your scale? That's even that's the entry level. Let's not talking bigger, You got to be able to justify that investment on the scale that you're at for that to make sense.
And what the requirements for still being considered organic, even if you do pay all the money, is really not, it's really
changes. It's an evolving thing too. It changes all the time.
But the spectrum of different things that, basically if it's any way derived of any sort of living creature, then they can essentially justify it as being organic or from living matter at some point can be considered organic. So there's not really, other than, the same stuff that you're already trying to keep out of your system, there's not really a whole lot of stuff that is inorganic that you're going to be able to add into your system without having negative effects anyway.
There's some minerals. There's some synthetic mineral salts. Look at great example would be iron chelates. Adding iron to your system, there's stuff you can use in a certified organic system that is an iron supplement, but there's not really a whole lot of options for organic. You can theoretically use citric acid, but that has a whole bunch of its own problems in an aquaponic system, and you can't use that long term because of the citrate buildup and a bunch of other issues. So you're really limited with that, and you really just have to use stuff that's organically allowable, rather than, you can't have every single input, unfortunately, or at least at this time anyway, be certified, OMRI certified organic. It can be OMRI approved, but you know what I mean? You're not going to be able to get, 100% all certified organic inputs. Though you can have certifiable organic inputs, but there's a difference.
Right, and even with the OMRI stamp, it's still it's the same product that you would put in otherwise, I guess is my point. It's not like you're going to go out and find, like you were saying, your options are pretty limited anyway, so it's not like making the attempt or going through it is going to somehow lead you down a different path. Like, the question here is like, what products should we stay away from in terms of the OMRI list? And I don't, I just don't put a lot of stock in the list. To me, it just feels like another way for a different company to make 20 grand, when really, if you look at their criteria for what is considered organic, it's pretty wide. It's really like, it's more like that sticker represents who paid them 20 grand as opposed to what the actual product is. So I wouldn't use that as a method of trying to determine what I would put in my system or what I wouldn't put in my system.
Well, I mean, it's a good starting point. I mean, if it's almost certifiable, it's at least a shorter list of things that are okay. But there's all kinds of like pretty ridiculously toxic chemicals that are all almost certifiable that you could never want to realistically dose in your system. Another one that would totally prevent you from using an organic certified system is hydroxides. You can't use hydroxides in an organically certifiable system. That's one of the biggest. Occasionally, I hear people using commercial stuff, but that's another common one that you have to kind of X off your list as far as that goes.
Yeah, I guess I would just look more at the things that are already used in aquaponics or in aquaculture, or even hydroponics, before I would be overly concerned about whether or not it is OMRI certified. So yeah. I think we're just saying the same thing in a different way. So you got any other questions over there?
I think that's all of them. Oh wait, there might be one more from that thread. Starting a greenhouse and expanding multiple greenhouses if it could make some cash. You can absolutely do that, but you're going to have to adapt it to your climate and make sure that you can climate control it as cheaply as possible. And, unless you're working with a company or someone that's experienced in adapting it to your local climate, or someone that's used to doing it at your latitude, or your altitude, that's another factor for both UV rating on your plastics as well as your temperature rating and wind rating on everything. I guess making sure you talk to someone that really knows what they're doing, or working with a company that really knows what they're doing is going to be your best bet. You can do everything from a single greenhouse. I mean, you can do them pretty cheap, especially if you're going to do hoop houses instead of full-blown greenhouses. They can be built out pretty simply. It just depends on what you're looking to grow. So I had another fun idea for a topic. Is there for a thing we'll do each time? This time was so I wanted to do like a variety of non-cannabis plant we'll throw in here each week. I wanted to mention there's a really cool variety of lettuce called Paris Island lettuce, and it's really heat tolerant. You could actually grow it here in Jamaica, believe it or not, where it's 85, 90 degrees in the daytime in full sun, and it works works really good, even in the full-blown heat. And I wanted to mention that that's a real good variety. It's a bit commonly available in the U.S., but it's one of the ones that we've been able to find some seeds for down here, and is doing really well despite the heat after about 3 weeks.
Hey, Steve, there was another question in chat too. I don't know if you saw that. He says, should I boil my water in order to have a good pH level? I'm guessing meant there. Or must I use reverse osmosis? This is before starting my system.
Oh, so if you're just starting your system off, the only thing you really have to worry about is chlorine or chloramines. And the best way to learn about that is to call up your local whoever your water provider is, and ask them if they use chloramine. Gotta love internet in Jamaica.
You're back.
Sorry about that. Where was I? Oh, so I would recommend. I think I left off at RO water. Is that where I cut out? Before that.
I think you cut out when you were talking about contacting wherever your water comes from. So if you have city water,
okay.
contact the city.
Yeah.
If you have well water,
Yeah,
obviously there's no chlorine in it. So
yeah, so you just want to worry about chlorine and chloramine, which is chlorine and ammonia. Make sure you contact your water supply, and make sure that they're not using that in your water. They don't use it often, but some places do. The other part of it is you don't really want to use RO water because it totally strips out your pH balance, a lot of your micronutrients that you want in your system naturally. A little bit of copper, a little bit of other things. They're real low ppm levels. It's totally fine for your plants. The plants want that. So that's one huge thing against RO, unless your water is really bad. If your water is really bad, you might want to consider it, or cutting your water with some rainwater. That's even an option for you, depending on your climate. It's another great way to help cut down on some of the heavy mineralization if your water is really hard. There was another part of the question. Oh, and as far as boiling your water, boiling of water is not going to really do much as far as anything that I can see as far as
it would release chlorine.
Anything else? And then is using pH up and down for my aquarium okay to use in my DWC res? I've been using it and haven't noticed any problems. Then again, I'm new. Oh, it depends on which products. So General Hydro products, I think you use those, right?
The only one I use is the General Hydro pH down, because my water comes out naturally high at almost 8.5, sometimes even a little bit higher than that. But it's well water, so like you were saying, I get a lot of good nutrients.
I think your mic is muted, unless it's me.
My mic is muted?
No, it's me.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I use their pH down in order to get my well water down. It comes out really high, 8.5, 8.6. And so I use it in very small doses in order to bring my pH down. Now, if I'm setting up a new system, then obviously I just pH it and let it cycle for a little while just to make sure that it's good before I add fish to it, like I did with the front porch out there. The reason I use General Hydro is because it's primarily phosphoric acid. There's a little bit of citric acid in it, but for the most part, its main ingredient is phosphoric acid. And I use it in my system, and I use it very small amounts at a time. If I have fish in the system, I use like no more than a cap full every 20 minutes, and then you just kind of have to step it down. And so add a cap full, wait at least 20 minutes, let your system cycle through a few times, mix everything up, test it again. If it needs to go down again, add another cap full, and just go really slow. I've been doing that for years and haven't had any fish issues. Oh, Jack says that he uses GH for the nutrients, but API for my fish. I'm not sure what's an API. Is it just API pH down? Is that what it is, Jack? Steve, I think you're muted. Still can't hear you, Steve. Trying to find the ingredients now. Still can't hear you. Jack, can you still hear me? I think we lost Steve. Still can't hear you. Anyway, so I had to look it up on their website in the PDF. If you go in and look, it looks like it's primarily sulfuric acid. I'm trying to see if I see anything else in there. They have a PDF that you can scroll through that has a lot of the information in it.
How about now?
Hey, there you go. Now I can hear you.
How about now? How about now?
Yeah.
Good. I don't know what the hell happened.
I don't either.
Like I said, we had some audio issues earlier. Okay, we're all good. Where were we?
So I looked that up. Jack was asking about the other pH down, and so I just went and looked it up. They have a PDF with all the safety information. You have to scroll through and find out, but that pH down from API is mostly sulfuric acid. So that's going to be a little bit stronger, in my opinion.
Yeah, plus you're using sulfur for a bunch of other things like potassium sulfate, magnesium sulfate, and everything else, and you're better off using something like phosphoric acid, or even worst case scenario, hydrochloric acid, like muriatic acid would be a better option, worst case scenario. But if you're looking for a product line, you can use that's both aquariums and cannabis. The best one I know about there is the Aqua Vitra planted aquarium line. They have I'm not going to say it's 100% perfect, but it's a decent one to look at if you're looking for something you can use for both, as far as a good starting point.
Or if
you
had General Hydro stuff for your non-aquaponic stuff, I guess, however you want to look at it, your other hydro stuff, it's really the same stuff. I bought it at the grow shop. And you can look at the back and should be able to tell, or if it's not on. Some of the bottles of General Hydro don't have the ingredients list on it. The big bottle does, but the small one doesn't. So you can look it up and see the full list online if you want to, but it's primarily phosphoric with a little bit of citric. And that's going to be just a little bit softer on your system. Now, if you're just starting it out, like you were talking about, if you don't have anything in there yet at all, then you can balance it out with just about anything you want without threatening anything, and let it sit for a while, and then add your fish to it later on after that. I would say that would probably be fine.
I had another question about biochar. Biochar, I have seen zero impact on my plants when I've used it, with cannabis or otherwise. If anything, it's going to lower your micronutrients because it's going to behave like an activated carbon and suck up some of your micronutrients. I have to see anyone that's had any growth with it. I'm not going to like poo-poo on it for anybody or anything, but I have personally tested it a couple times and haven't seen any benefit beyond what everything else I'm doing.
I don't understand. I mean, I don't use it a lot, but I've researched quite a bit on it. And from what I understand is if it's not fully what they call activated or charged or whatever like that, then just like you're saying, it's going to be pulling out nutrients as opposed to putting them back in. So, and that can take a long time. From my understanding, it can be like 5 to 7 years for it to be able to fully absorb everything so that it gets to the point where it starts releasing. So maybe if you were in a situation where you wanted to suck some nutrients out of a system, it might be a relatively good option to put in, non-activated biochar. I could definitely see that being an application that you might want to do, but that seems like fairly rare. And I wouldn't, not saying that you shouldn't, but I wouldn't personally use it as like a primary media. At least until I learn more.
It might be a good like perlite replacement for your soil mixture if you're doing dual root zone. I mean, that might have a great application for that. It's not going to have the kind of volume to really do a whole lot of taking up a whole lot, in that scenario. We did have somebody else ask me about Boogie Brew and Veganics, the Veganics line. I'll do some more research on that, and we'll get on that next week. That particular, I just need to research that a little bit more, but I apologize for not.
Boogie Brew, is that what you said?
Yeah, I'll put them in the podcast thing for next week.
I don't think I've heard of it.
I've heard of Boogie Brew before. It's like a tea. It's like a compost tea kit in a bag, if memory serves me right. So the other thing I
approve. I like worm tea. So do we answer, let's see, who is it? Kanika and Jack, did you guys have any other questions? You guys still hanging out? Oh, I guess we could talk about the they just finalized the edibles in Oregon, the 550. Oh, your sound is gone again, isn't it? Are you muted? Why'd you break it, Steve? This is sweet. Now I can play charades. I'm glad we answered all your questions, Jack. Thanks for tuning in. He's giving up on the mic. Jack, are you just starting to set up a system, or do you have an aquaponic system already? Nice. What have you grown in it so far? What's been your best? What have you enjoyed? Awesome. Any luck over there, Steve? Oh, now I lost video too. Jack, can you still hear me when he's disconnected? Oh, cool. I always wondered that. So did you pull your fish out? What do you mean? Oh, I see, deep water culture with this slow drip. Nice. It won't let me, Steve.
There. Hope you can hear me now.
Hey, there you are. I was talking with Jack.
You dig it. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sounds good. So I was talking with Jack while you're gone. Apparently, when you're disconnected, I'm still live.
Hold on. All right. How about now? Let's try that.
So Jack was
Well,
running
I think
like
I
a
can.
decoupled system.
I think
with-
you can hear me and I can't hear you. I can't win. Anyways, fucking A.
You can't hear me?
I can't win. I don't know why all of a sudden my stuff went haywire this afternoon.
Where did you hear about our podcast, Jack? Cool. Now you got no mic. Reddit microbrewery. Nice. Yeah, I'm not on Reddit at all. Should probably make an account, I guess. Steve's having a rough technical day. If you haven't yet, make sure you check out our YouTube channels. You can see this.
Attempt number 3.
All right. I can hear you.
We have two-way communication.
All right.
We have two-way communication. Holy shit. I don't know what the hell happened. My audio just decided to have a fit. Where were we?
I was just talking to Jack about while you were in and out. He has a decoupled aquaponic system, I guess you would say.
Okay.
He was running a deep water culture with just an air stone with his fish tank water, and I think he said he had a goldfish in there that he took out because it was eating the roots. So
it's a good way to get started.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
you can
definitely easy to set up.
Yeah, you can put something in there like, guppies or, I'm trying to think what else would be root safe. There's plenty of medium-sized fish you can put in there that are pretty cheap to come by.
Plus, if you have enough root space in your DWC, like a lot of times people do them in buckets, if you keep the water level down so that they can't basically eat all the roots, then it's not, in my experience, it's not overly detrimental to let them nibble at the bottom of them. So I don't know about your experience with it, but I ran a cloner like that, and with just a fish tank, just one goldfish in the bottom, and in a little tote with holes drilled in the top. And I ran it like that for quite a while. You have to change the water because there's like zero solid filtration, obviously. So you have to change the water out like any other cloner. But it worked, and it definitely ate the roots. It was just a goldfish too, like what Jack had, and so it didn't seem to bother them at all as long as I didn't have the water level all the way up so they could eat the roots all the way down to the nub,
Yeah. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. That's I don't know. I don't like stuff nibbling on the roots, but a little bit of root harassment, especially for herbs and stuff, is not bad at all for flavor and things like that. but that's just, my experiences.
I only did it on clones. That's really the only thing I can say. Didn't seem to bother them. I know a lot of people that do regular clones that trim their roots also. So.
Oh yeah, I always trim my roots before I move my clones into the planting. Before they go into the dual root zone pots, I always trim up the tap roots to make that work a lot better.
So you should just let the fish do it.
Yeah.
Silver tip tetras, mollies, cherry barbs, shrimps. That's one thing I haven't done yet. I haven't done any shrimp or like crayfish or anything like that.
Yeah, the biggest thing with them is making sure your pH stays very stable, and making sure your phosphorus, you're keeping an eye on what levels they are, because if you overshoot those, they're pretty much toast. I guess that's the biggest thing. There's other factors too, but calcium and dissolved carbonate hardness are much more important for systems, especially if we're looking to do commercial scale invertebrates. That's really key to their life cycle, or for egg laying. If you're going to do, a lot of people like to do red cherry shrimp in their DWC rafts, and you can absolutely do those, but you want to make sure that you're maintaining your KH so that you maintain proper shell hardness on both them and the eggs for breeding purposes. I guess that'd be the kind of the real quick crash course on that one.
Right.
What was the other thing here?
Well, I think before you got disconnected, I mentioned the edibles thing.
Yeah.
Got confirmed here in Oregon, so now Oregon officially has the lowest allowed amount of edibles, which is completely stupid and ridiculous because people are just going to buy twice as much stuff. It's retarded.
Yeah, I agree.
It definitely, hurts patients. That's probably the most frustrating part about it.
Yeah, just basically their cost just went up for no fucking reason at all. It's just ridiculous, and that's really who this ends up hurting. Like you're saying, this is who this hurts the most. There's no reason why medical patients should be paying this much for medicine. This is stupid.
Right, especially when you can really just up the dosage in the same product that exists already. And it's not like the manufacturer, like whoever's, I say manufacturer, but a lot of times it's just, when it comes to local medibles, it's just people in a commercial kitchen, like just local people here that make it, fill like 80% of the dispensaries around here. And I still think that's like the main issue that they want to get rid of, is to create a vacuum in an otherwise stable market. But, they have no choice. They're not even going to be able to have licenses and be able to make product at all if they don't follow the regulations. So it's not like they can really do anything about it. And so
any rules for concentrate?
Doubling the cost to do business for them, on top of doubling the cost for the patient themselves. So it really sucks.
Any rules
or at
for
least double it. So right now it's at what is it? I can't remember now what the dosage is. It's like 550 or something like that. And I think Colorado is 10-100, right?
It was 10-100. Oh yeah, 10-100. Although I think you can still get 250 milligram or 500. I think the biggest that I can remember seeing lately is 500 milligrams, but it might be 250 now. But that's on the medical side. I couldn't tell you anything about the rec side because I just don't have a reason to go over there.
Right. And so anyway, so in Oregon, it's 550 for both medical and rec. And that's just ridiculously low. If you're not familiar with food dosages, it's not, or medicine dosage. It's because the same thing is going to apply to RSO. It's going to apply to
what?
Yeah, it's really, and there's a hearing coming up.
Pretty much forget about treating cancer in Oregon. Shit.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked up, and so essentially the main option will be coconut oil capsules is basically what they're trying to
A lot of people are allergic to coconut oil. That's another huge problem. Like you need to have sunflower oil or canola oil or chocolate, or you need to have a diverse market. You can't pigeonhole people into this stuff. A lot. I know somebody right now that has a coconut issue. That people. Why this is ridiculous. This is a medicine. Do we regulate any other pill this way? No, this is stupid.
Right. You don't mix oxycodone with coconut oil and
Or cocaine.
take 10 times as many pills. Like, that's basically what you're doing. It's really stupid. So I noticed Jack over here, he also asked about Epsom salt for deficiency. Does that really work?
Yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And foiler spray is probably, another great way to put it on. You can dose it right in the tank.
Yeah, so for tank dosing, it's so your target is between especially for cannabis, you're looking between 30 and 50 parts per million with magnesium. And to do that, you're looking at about it's about 101 grams per 100 gallons of water in order to dose your Epsom salt. So and that gets you to a 25 parts per million. So if you're looking to aim for 50, but you got to remember you're never at zero. You have a base amount of magnesium in your system, so you're going to start off at 10 or 15 or whatever. So that's why I like telling people, for 25 parts per million, 0 to 25 parts per million or 25 to 50 parts per million, whatever you want to do. You're looking at approximately 101 grams per 100 gallons in order, if you measure dry weight on a scale.
And then I see he also was talking about New Jersey edibles only being allowed for children under the medical marijuana program, so adults cannot buy edibles. I don't know anything about that.
So let me get this straight. Colorado's super concerned about kids getting edibles, and New Jersey is kids are the only ones that can get edibles. That is the most schizophrenic cannabis law reasoning I think I've ever heard. Like cannabis edibles for children is amazing. I'm not poo-pooing that at all, but why are we restricting either one of those to pediatric or non-pediatric? That doesn't make any sense at all. Again, what kind of pills do we restrict only to children? Is there a single pill on earth that are solely, except for maybe effectiveness? There's no. This is completely ridiculous.
I feel like if we only had children's ibuprofen.
Yeah, what if you could only buy baby Advil? This is stupid. Give me a break? This is why we need to achieve normalization, and we need someone like Bernie Sanders or somebody else that's going to actually fight for our rights and everything else. And as far as the cannabis movement, you get Donald Trump, who puts Chris Christie in. Forget about the cannabis market in the U.S., which is why I'm diversifying outside the U.S. just in case.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know anything about that, Jack, but honestly, it sounds crazy enough. It's probably accurate. That's logic when it comes to cannabis.
And New Jersey, Chris Christie and his ridiculous logic that absolutely would not at all surprise me in any way, shape, or form. The other news article, I had two other news articles. One, congratulations to Pennsylvania for becoming the 24th state to legalize medical cannabis. It's my home state, so fuck yeah.
That's awesome.
It was nice to see them do it. We'll see. It looks to be not quite as bad as New York, but still super restrictive. No, at least in the beginning, no flower sales, no smoking flower, it'll be all concentrates and stuff. And that's another one. Look, you got the West Coast that wants to regulate concentrates and edibles. You got the East Coast that only wants to have concentrates and edibles. At some point we need some federal level stuff to come. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but just a basic look. There's nothing wrong with high concentrate medicine. Period. Legalize that. Make sure that's in the constitutional. Whenever they pass a cannabis thing federally, that has to be part of it. 2, home growing has to be protected. And we need this to maintain genetics and everything else and proper. And the plant counts need to be reasonable. On top of that, you also need to be able to make sure that no one's allowed to If anyone's doing any kind of genetically modified cannabis, it cannot be grown outdoors, period. And it has to have HEPA filters and all that stuff. Because that's going to come down the line. Something we can do about it, but what we can do is regulate it so that that pollen doesn't end up like corn where it screws everything up, And it's just a demon that we're going to have to try and keep a leash on rather than try and slay, because it's, at least for the time being, would be pretty much impossible. If we can't do it for veggies, we sure as hell ain't going to do it for pot. And
Right.
we
That's
need
not like anybody's going to come and complain because I have my entire backyard planted with tomato plants.
Yeah. And some other things that really should be done for, at least for market sale stuff, is they should require cannabinoid testing for all sales to the public, which I was against in the beginning in Colorado, but now I like it a lot. It's basically no different than putting the proofing on a beer or a liquor. It's exactly the same. You're saying, okay, there's this much of this product in this bottle, and then it helps you evaluate customer, the value to the customer. If nothing else, it's a customer protection. And not to mention, especially as they get more diversified with terpene profile, cannabinoid profile, and everything else, it's only going to be able to help you provide with the most amount of information so you can properly choose the best medicine or recreational cannabis for you and your current needs. It helps everybody. Not to mention, it allows growers to go after strains that have higher value. And then if you're leaving a smaller grower or farmer, it allows you the opportunity to grow a more niche type of cannabis or something with a unique profile and get a higher dollar per ounce than you otherwise would typically be able to. And as we get into as the market gets more and more flooded, that kind of thing is going to help out some of these smaller growers or smaller companies trying to get off the ground. I mean, that's a huge part of that. And the last thing I wanted to touch on was making sure that especially extracts, but to a lesser extent flower, all have some basic pesticide testing. This stuff isn't that expensive anymore. Yeah, there needs to be some investment with the facilities and stuff, but every state should have like a state-sanctioned cannabis testing facility that anyone, private grower or commercial grower, can go and maybe have a couple different bureaus throughout the state. Same as alcohol. Well, all these beer guys have to have their stuff inspected. I have no problem with that, making sure they're not using crazy pesticides on the barley and stuff like that. This is exactly the same. And again, it only comes down to customer protections. Look at ivermectin and what's the product that was just pulled from the market? The one pesticide, the miticide that everyone used. Guardian. Yeah, look at Guardian having ivermectin in it. This is exactly why we need that kind of testing. Not to pick on growers, but to make sure that we're getting a really good product. And then imagine if you have something that's sprayed with a ton of ivermectin, and then you're concentrating that pesticide too. And then they've done testing on the application rate of a given pesticide on a plant that you're ingesting, orally, or you're inhaling, whatever. You're inhaling by breathing it in and after contact of it later on. That's all regulated to a certain ppm level and what your blood can uptake and all that. What they don't have is they don't have any regulation for if you're concentrating it down into after the fact and then smoking it and burning it. That's a whole other that changes it chemically, can release carcinogens. It could raise it to a ppm level that's concentration with the active ingredient that could be harmful to your health. I mean, it opens up a whole Pandora's box of issues that you otherwise wouldn't have, and most other markets don't even have to ever think about or deal with. And those are kind of the basis that you need to have those in a basic cannabis bill for customer protections and for liability protections for the businesses that are operating. If you can prove that everything's fine and someone tries to make a false claim against you, you can use those stuff in court to protect yourself and your name. It's every bit about protecting. It's one of the reasons why I'm, I wrote a letter over to them here in Jamaica saying, look, you need to have like a long-term plan to have, at least in the tourist areas, a basic pesticide testing and basic cannabinoid testing, and as at least a base level to start off with, at least for the stuff that's going to the tourists and things like that, because you want to protect the good name of Jamaica and the quality of their product and everything else. That's first and foremost. You want people to, they're known for it, same as Amsterdam, same as California, Oregon, Washington, Colorado. You don't want to get a bad name for your your region or your growers or anything, because you guys have all been using stuff that's going to make you sick. So it helps protect your brand. It's all about making sure we can protect ourselves and try to hold the market value a little bit as well in longer term.
Yeah, I think that the pesticide and testing is, stuff is crucial. Just like you said about Guardian, having that get ousted. And Oregon is, they, I don't know if they were the first, but I know that they did it from the onset.
No, Oregon was the first to have the comprehensive pesticide list that I'm aware of.
And when it's pretty apparent when you go into a dispensary out here, everything is just displayed with the testing right on it. So you look at the sample, you can smell it, you can do whatever, and then it's usually sitting right on top of a copy of the testing, and then you get to see everything that's in it. You get to see everything that you're smoking, which I think is really an incredible thing as a consumer. It's great, and as a patient, it's really necessary.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Jack, yeah, I can definitely imagine Monsanto coming in and
they've been working on this for a while, dude. Like, if you think for a minute that the day that it's not federally announced, that like the day after Monsanto's like, we are announcing the largest cannabis grow on earth with all this crazy ass genetically grown weed that grows this, that, and the other, and it'll do your laundry and it'll roll the joints for you and blah, 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 and like, screw all that. Like, I'm super for figuring out like, certain gene expression, or, for example, if they find a way to change a gene from one to the other and make a much more medicinal plant, and they can prove that it's healthy and stable after a few years, then, I might be open to it. But again, that there's such a huge Pandora's box, and they've already shown over in Asia that they've made genetically altered rice that was suddenly making people allergic and stuff like that. We don't need that with the cannabis industry. The cannabis industry has enough other demons to fight right now. That's the same reason why we got to stay on top of this pesticide thing. The cannabis industry has 1,000 other demons that we have to fight. And if they say, oh, well, look at this poison-laced weed that they're smoking, and this is why it's not as good as tobacco, and it just gives them more bullshit-ass ammo that doesn't really have much foundation, but it sure as hell is a sensational headline. And this is why stuff like this is important. Yeah, it's stupid. Yeah, it sucks. Yeah, it's another regulation that's on us, but it's for a reason. It's protecting us. All of us growers, and protecting our name and our reputation of everybody. That's why it's important that you don't, that's why you should never skimp out on don't use stuff that's not approved for cannabis. Don't try and save a little bit of money and try and save that harvest at the end. What's going to happen if everybody gets sick? They're going to hunt your ass down, or you're going to end up arrested, or you're going to end up, they inspect you and they're going to end up shutting down your dispensary, or, whatever. You know what I mean? And it's really important that we, especially right now, the industry is booming. There's a lot of people trying to capitalize on it, that we don't cut corners and give everybody a bad name, because it'll just give us a noose to hang ourselves with as far as the public goes. And we're uphill battle as far as trying to win acceptance for a lot of people as it is.
Right. And like you said, we have we have a lot of other battles to fight, like the idiots that keep blowing themselves up constantly. Doing open blasting, like,
oh yeah,
I went off on this before, I'm not going to do it again. Just don't do it. Don't be that guy on the news that
or if you do open blast, do it in the center of your backyard with a picnic table on a breezy day, or like a light breezy day. Like, don't do it in your garage or your kitchen or whatever. Like, you shouldn't be doing it, but if you are dumb enough to do it and you for some reason have to do it, sure as hell don't be doing that shit in an enclosed area. You're just going to blow yourself up and make all of us look bad. I mean, in Denver, up until they took away the protections on the state constitution, every other week there's a story on the news, and it sucked, because it was like all these other people can operate completely safely and not screw it up, and then you got a couple of asshats making us all look bad, and it just is not needed.
Yeah, don't do it. That's all I'm gonna say. I think in one of our previous podcasts, I went off on.
Oh yeah, I forgot. You had a really good.
I'm not gonna do it again. You can go listen to what I have to say there. To sum up, don't do it.
Yeah, especially when you have options like CO2, which is pressurized. You can still blow yourself up, but it's not going to be a kaboom, at least as far as a fireball goes. And the other way you can do it is with the rosin press. Although I understand, they all have different profiles, but depending on what you're looking to do, and unless you're really looking to further isolate with some of the terpene stuff or some of the other weirder isolation methods. Although I think they mostly use isopropylene, if memory serves me right. I'm still kind of learning up on some of that terpene stuff. It's kind of so new, it's kind of hard to find a whole lot of info on at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know a ton about it either.
I know it's distilled in ethanol. I just don't know much beyond that, at least at the moment. I have some stuff to read up on it, but I just haven't had a chance. Too much other crap on my plate at the moment. Is there any other questions? I think that's all of them from Jack. The other one I had is the UN's meeting right now to address all the drug laws and possibly change the UN treaty regarding, hopefully regarding drugs internationally, which would completely take away all these countries' rights to not legalize, as well as the US's, bullshit argument to not legalize, not right, but argument to legalize. So that's something that's really awesome that'll hopefully that happens tomorrow. So definitely keep an eye to the news on that. It's be really important for the future of, both cannabis and import and export from many countries and a few other things. I know it'll, assuming everything happens, hopefully open up quite a bit of doors for a lot of people. So.
Yeah, I think that's about it.
I think that's everything for today. Oh, so you guys leave a comment in the podcast, and we'll pick somebody out of the comments. We'll do a little.
All right.
Pull up a little generator next week, and we'll randomize everybody. And if you put a comment in the video, we have a nutrient line from Atria Aquaponics. It's specifically designed for dual root zones. They'll send you out a gift package for them and from them, and they were kind enough to give us that for $420. And so leave us a comment in the video. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and check out. I got a. If you guys have any other questions or anything, feel free to shoot me an email at potentponics@gmail. And trying to think if there's anything else. You can find us on Dude Grows. I'll have start getting the episodes back up on SoundCloud. If there's anywhere else you guys want us to re-upload the things. I know someone requested iTunes. I was having a pain with that. I personally really hate Apple, but if there's enough people out there that want it, I'll do it. But I had to fight it tooth and nail the other day, unless you happen to have an easier method. But I think that's everything. But yeah, leave a comment, and then we're going to pick someone, and then they're going to get a set of nutrients for dual root zoning from thanks to Atria. And yeah, I guess that's it for me. You got anything else?
No, that's it. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. AP Meds is my channel. Ponics is Steve's channel. And Aquaponic Cannabis Growers Group on Facebook. Or the Aquaponics groups on Facebook. Definitely check them out. Jack wants to know how he can get in touch with us offline. So Steve just mentioned his email. Jack, my name is Marty Waddell. If you have a Facebook, I'll type it in the chat here. You can hit us up in that Facebook group anytime.
Sure, and if you ever want to get a hold of Marty.
What's that?
If you ever want to get a hold of Marty too, and you email me, I'll pass it over to him or forward it to him and to his email or whatever else too. If he doesn't want to give that up, that's no problem. I can do that for you.
I just put it in the chat box
okay.
over there, so it's just long. It's mainly has to say it, so
okay.
You just type it out.
Cool.
So yeah, you can email me there, message me there. Like I said, the cannabis growers group is also a great place to get a hold of us. You can post questions on there. And there's a couple of other people that can answer questions as well that have grown aquaponically. I know we've tried to get him on the podcast a couple of times and hasn't quite worked out yet.
Cool. Well, I had one last thing I wanted to leave everybody with, something to research if they're looking to find a fun new plant that I happen to have a chance to learn about while down here in Jamaica. Look up something called Pangola grass. If you're into ethogens, I think you'll be happy about what you find out with that. And I'll just leave it at that. But it's something that I had never heard of or seen before, and I thought it was pretty neat. And I won't say much more than that, but do your research. And something that I had never heard of, I can't really find pretty much a whole lot of information on, but I thought it was pretty trick to see. So yeah, subscribe to us. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back again next week. Happy 420 to everybody, and we'll see you guys again next week. I'll hopefully have some videos up before the episode next week, and definitely make sure. I know Marty's been doing a ton of great videos lately on his build, so be sure to check that out as well. Thanks everybody for joining us, and have a great week.